What I would like us to talk about today is, where does it start? How can a devout believer become the one who doesn't even believe anymore in the existence of God? Apparently it's possible. You maybe even know some people who went through there. It's hard for a person to understand that if they didn't go through an experience like that, but apparently if it happens to them, it can happen to any of us here. Where does it start? When do you make that first step? Going away from God and finishing without Him. Today, we're going to open the Bible. We're going to read a lot of Bible verses, because I have only one sermon to go through this. This series that we will have in the next 4 Sabbaths is going to discuss the question of loss of faith, and then track it back to up the hill walk, until I hope in a month from now, every one of us who attends all 4 of these following Sabbaths is going to say, I'm closer to God today than I was a month ago. So today, my sermon is going to focus, first of all, on identification. We will go through the Bible and we will address all of the examples in the Bible that talk about people losing faith. And I would like you to reflect, not just inhale it, but reflect and try to recognize yourselves. Here's why I'm saying that. I got this sermon a little bit short of notice because Pastor Gordon was supposed to be here and preach it, but he ended up staying in Florida because it's Florida. Okay, so let's put it this way. I didn't say that in a good sense at all. It's Florida and it's geriatric bureaucracy. They're horrible. They're horrible. So I had a couple of days, like 4 or 5 days to prepare for this sermon. But the journey that this preparation took me on was this. I'm writing the stuff down, reasoning, figuring it out, and like, oh yeah, I remember this one. Yeah. And then going on, I remember this one too. Oh my goodness, so many failures to remember. All of us are somewhere in between this path. Sometimes we are completely oblivious of where we are, but the matter of fact is that our life journey took us through a certain amount of doubt that drew us away from God. If we are capable of recognizing when it happens, and if we are capable addressing it the moment we recognize it in our emotional response, in our intellectual response, in our relational response, we will be able to prevent ourselves getting in the situation as this minister, coming back and saying there is no more God. I don't believe in God anymore. I didn't hear all of his arguments. I'm not saying that his arguments are weak. What I'm challenging is this. He went back challenging his faith. Critical thinking, it's crucial. He went back critically challenging his faith. But I have an impression that he never went back critically challenging his critical challenging. Maybe he did. I don't know. But that is my impression. And I would like us today to go together through this and just try to reflect. It starts here. So this is what I came to through reading the Bible. There are 3 responses, 3 things that happen to us that drive us away from God. It's our emotional response, it's our intellectual response, and it's our relational response that on certain instances drive us away from God. So let's start with the emotional response. 2 main ones that I found in the Bible as emotional response are as listed. First one is fear. This one, the best example for this one is in Matthew chapter 14. So, the background for the verse. Disciples are on the boat. There is a storm happening. Jesus is not with them. Suddenly, Jesus starts walking on water. They see him. What happens to them? They freak out. They think it's a ghost. And Jesus tells them, guys, chill, it's me, relax. Now, they still don't believe because Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to walk on water. Satan was the first one to use those words. If you remember, when he tempted Jesus in the desert, he would say, if you're the Son of God, take these stones, make them bread. If you're the Son of God, if you're the Son of God, and so on. He is challenging Jesus' identity. And Jesus was like, bam, straight in the face. But over here, Jesus was not like that. Over here, Peter tells him, if it's you, help me walk on water. And the reason why Jesus responded the way he did, he heard Peter's lack of faith in that moment. Because why? They were in distress. They were in a boat, in a storm, they couldn't handle, and they see a ghost. Like, it's pretty creepy. Now, this is one of the most amazing moments for me in the Bible. Put yourself in his sandals. He is walking on water. Like, that's crazy. Try walking on water, you'll see. It's crazy. It's crazy. But, verse 30, when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was what? He was terrified. What happened? He began to sink. That paralyzing power of fear is the first thing that happens to us when we look at what's happening in my life with God. Fear will make us sink. In Peter's case, it was a physical sinking, literal. So he freaks out and he cries, "Save me, Lord," he shouted. But the matter of fact is, when we are afraid about situations in our life, when we are afraid about things that are happening, about the things that might happen, when we are afraid, don't pay attention to the lights, we have electrical issues. There we go. Don't be afraid of the light. If we are afraid, we are gonna sink away from God. Now, we are afraid quite often in life. The older we get, the more mature life becomes, the more frightening it is. But have this in mind. The moment your emotional response is overwhelmingly fear, know what is going to happen. It is going to drive you away from God. Second emotional response that is overwhelmingly noticed in the Bible is grief. And I believe that this is much more tangible for us to relate to than anything else. John chapter 11, verse 21. We're going to read it in a second. So, Lazarus is sick. Mary and Martha see that it's really bad. Okay, this is getting bad. We got to find Jesus. Where is he? Oh my goodness, he's 3 days walk away. Send the messengers. They send the messengers. Messengers come to Jesus. Jesus, Lazarus is sick. Godspeed, guys. Thank you very much. All that time, 3 days there, 3 days back. Martha and Mary are like, yeah, Jesus can do it. I mean, if Jesus was here, he's going to heal him. If okay, he might get stuck on a ferry. He should be here soon. Just imagine their train of thought. And how many times were we in that same train of thought? God, please, 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 please help. Please. I don't know what to do. This is going to end up bad. This is going to end up really bad. Please help. Remember, I hope you do, because I do. And Lazarus dies. And Jesus is still nowhere to be seen. One day, second day, third day. What are Mary's and Martha's thoughts? Their thoughts are revealed in this verse, because the same sentence that Martha says over here is the same sentence that you will find just a couple of verses later that Mary exclaims. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you have been here, my brother would not have died." If only. What do you hear in there? Yeah, you hear a lot of bitterness, you hear a lot of pain, but you hear Martha scorning Jesus. Why did you fail me, God? Why did you let everything fall apart when I needed you so bad? And I prayed and prayed and asked. Grief makes us see an incapable God. Because all we see is God gave me grief. I needed help. I needed release. I needed protection. All that God gave me was grief. Martha and Mary are not the only ones who had that problem. And this one was very disturbing to me that we're going to read right now, because I couldn't get it for a long time. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It's in Matthew chapter 11. So, John the Baptist, shining star of pre-Christian church, the first one, the pioneer, leading the way, cleaning the way for the Messiah. Always strong, always tough, always fearless. He knew exactly who Jesus was. He knew exactly who he himself was. And now he ends up in jail. And he sends his disciples to ask Jesus what? John the Baptist, who was in prison, heard about all the things the Messiah was doing. So he sent his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else?" Do you see faith in that sentence? There is not much faith in there. How come? How come? I couldn't wrap my mind around this. Like, what happened to John the Baptist? What happened to him? Grief. The only thing that I managed to see was grief. Dragging him down to the point of questioning the messiahship of a Messiah he came to announce. Let's move on. Next one is the intellectual response that drives us away from God. In 1 Kings, in chapter 19, there is a very funny, disturbingly funny story about Elijah. And this is why I find it funny. Because you see Elijah bouncing back literally from one end of the spectrum to another. Chapter 18, what do we have? We have Mount Carmel. We have Elijah on one side, and we have 400 of prophets of Baal on the other side. What does Elijah do? He says, okay, here's the deal. Let's have a God show off. Who's ever God shows off, that's the God. And everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. So Elijah is over there waiting for, come on, okay guys, come on, hit it. And they're trying and trying, and he's laughing at them, he's mocking them and so on. He's a total jerk on Mount Carmel. But he is so arrogant and proud and boastful because he knows who he's dealing with. He knows they're fake. He knows his God is real. Then he prays to God for response. So what did God do? Remember that story? Fire from heaven burns the sacrifice, burns the altar, evaporates all of the water from the trench like crazy. Amazing. Elijah takes all of those prophets to the Kedron River and slaughters them on spot. Sounds horrible, but that's the way they dealt with that kind of stuff at that time. But the matter of fact is, you see fearless, intrepid prophets standing against the whole nation. There is no fear in him. And then he hears that the princess is about to send assassins to kill him. That night he hears that. And what is his response to that? Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. What in the world? He is not afraid of the king, of the whole army, of the whole nation, and he chickens out because some bouncy queen wants to get him killed. It was not the fear. It was really not the fear, because here's what happens. If you keep on reading 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 7 to 10 reveal one very interesting thing. God comes to Elijah and he tells him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And Elijah tells him, "The whole nation has abandoned God, and I am the only one left." And then in verse 17, God tells him, "What are you talking about? I have 7,000 more of strong men who did not bow their knees to Baal nor kiss his image." And Elijah is like, "Oh, okay." Elijah's fear did not come from him being afraid of a little queen threatening him. Fear came from wrong information. Because he thought that he was the only one. He thought that he's standing by himself, and it just became overwhelming. I can't do this on my own. This is too much. The whole nation is against me. Everybody's against me. And God is like, you know, what are you talking about? We have plenty more people around here. Now the question is, how come that Elijah didn't have that information? He's the prophet of God. How come God didn't reveal him that information? Once we have the wrong information, we cling on to. It's very hard to break through with the right information. Moral of the story is, whatever you believe in, you better know really well why do you believe that. You better stand your ground with the right information, because if the information is flawed, your faith will be flawed. When your faith is flawed, it's going to crack under pressure. When you crack under pressure, you drift away from God. Another intellectual place where we fall into that can drive us away from God is failed expectations. Now, Mark 14, verse 50 says, Then all his disciples deserted him and ran away. What happened? Anybody? Why did they do that? What happened? Thunderstorm? No. Hungry people? No. Okay, lack of faith, but what happened? Why did they run away? What was the event? Jesus is arrested, and they are waiting for him to just burst out the thunderstorm out of his hands, annihilate the soldiers, and raise the kingdom of Israel above the Roman kingdom. And Jesus is right there in shackles, and he's leaving away. They're spanking him and mocking him. Jesus failed his messiahship expectations. Actually, their expectations. They wanted a Messiah, but not that Messiah. And the bare fact that God failed their expectations drove them to run away. How many times has God failed your expectations? How many times? Too many. Too many times. Our expectations put before God and then prioritized will eventually take us away from God, because we have our horizontal view of life. We don't have that overhead view that Jesus has. So when your expectations are failed, don't question God, question yourself. There is another thing that happens with failed expectations. Sometimes people lose their faith in God. And I heard that many times. Like I prayed so many times, I see so many people praying, and the prayers are not answered. There is no God. I mean, it's ridiculous to believe in that. Some people respond like that. Other people don't lose faith, but it happens, something else happens. Jonah chapter 4. So, God tells Jonah, go to Nineveh. I want you to preach to them that I'm going to destroy them if they don't repent. So Jonah freaks out like, no way, I'm not going to those crazy people. He runs away. Fish swallows him, 3 days travel, spits him out. He goes to Nineveh, all slimy and everything. He starts preaching. And lo and behold, people of Nineveh repent. And Jonah is praising God, and he's happy and he's celebrating with them because they repented, right? Right? This change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. Why did you even send me there? I had to spend 3 days in the belly of a fish, and I knew that you are a good God and that you're a forgiving God, and I told you right in the beginning, don't send me there because I don't want to talk to you. Bible says in verse 4, in chapter 4, that Jonah built him a hut, all angry, and he sat over there, and he was waiting to see what's going to happen to the city. And God is asking him, hey, Jonah, is it okay for you to be angry? And Jonah is like, yeah, it's okay. I'm going to die, but I'm going to be angry. He acts like a spoiled child, frankly, over there. But God is so gracious with him to bring us the lesson of anger. I got angry with God in 2009. I was so angry with God. So 5 years here in the country, 5 years, instead of trying to make money, instead of trying to figure out my immigrational status, instead of trying to figure out my future, what do? I come to this church to volunteer for $400 a month. For 5 years. And then in 2009, April 1st, my birthday, I get a letter from immigration. You have 30 days to leave the country. And I take that letter and I throw it before God. What's this? I'm not kidding. I was really, really mad. And I was really, really disillusioned. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to deal with this. There is, I don't know. I stopped praying. I stopped studying my Bible. I was just angry. And I so praise and I'm so happy that I have my wife with me because she was the pillar of faith for both of us through all of that time. But you see me back here, right? I was angry in vain, but I was very angry. I remember what does it mean to look at my life and then look at God and tell Him, you are a horrible father. I needed to mature. But it definitely took me away from God. Definitely. Next intellectual situation we could get into that will drive us away from God is very simple. Genesis chapter 3. So God tells Adam and Eve, eat whatever you want, just don't eat that fruit or you're going to die. And they're like, yes sir, all good, yay. Then some cool new animal shows up. A serpent starts talking, like, wow, serpent talking. And she comes to Eve. And she doesn't, no, that's not really like that. You're not going to die. On contrary, it's going to be crazy. You're going to love your life. You're going to become like God. Imagine that. And that's why Adam is blamed for the situation we are in right now. But Eve was the deceived one. Adam was standing right there next to her while she was talking to the serpent, and he just took that fruit and he ate it. Like, okay, wife says so. Happy wife, happy life, I guess. I guess that's the first example when that didn't work out that well. But the matter of fact is, the gullibility of Eve drove her to choose somebody else over God. How many times you run into a situation where you hear something controversial and it sounds so weird, you're like, wow, this is great stuff, but it's completely different from what I believe in, but it's such a great stuff, yeah, I gotta go for that. I hope you enjoyed last week's sermon, because I got a response from several people like, wow, that was tough. That stuff was scary. Like, that's crazy. The matter of fact is, some people fall for anything just because it's cool. Not too many of them, but I'm telling you, don't be gullible when it comes to your spiritual life. You might end up like Eve. Let's move on. A few more. The one next to last intellectual experience is arrogance. Mark 14:10. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them. Like, this guy lived with Jesus for years. He was there, right there. He saw all of the miracles. He heard all the stories. He was the only educated guy, except maybe Matthew, who had junior high. But he was the only one with a college degree. Everybody else was kind of elementary school dropouts. And he sees Jesus and he knows who Jesus is. He had his idea, like everybody else, of a Messiah who's going to bring political kingdom, but he still knew who Jesus was. How did it come to this? Very simple. You know what happened before this? That evening before this, Jesus is at a party and Mary shows up with alabaster box. Remember that? She breaks the alabaster box and anoints Jesus. John chapter 12 tells us that the one who complained about it was Judas himself. And it even says why. It says that Judas was the treasurer because he was the smartest one, so they just trusted him. And he would pretty much pay himself for the favor that he's been doing to them and taking from the treasury, putting in his own pocket. So, he sees this alabaster box, which was, in biblical terms, the value of an annual salary of that time. Let's say about 40 grand. So Judas, he sees that crash, like 40 grand. So like, wait, so by today's margin, what would be my, like, I should get 2.3%, 8 grand. Stupid woman! What did you do? You just... I mean, we should have sold that, and gave it to the poor, right? And then, Jesus, who does he defend? I can see Judas suddenly blushing, listening to Jesus' words, tucking his shoulders, walking back. Okay, you're going to stand up for her, huh? You're going to score me in front of everybody here. Embarrassing me like this? Oh, okay. Hey guys, what are you going to give me to betray him? Arrogance. I'm so important. My opinion is so important. God, I'm sure you're grateful that you have me around. It sounds weird, but there are people who will do that. People who will have a problem with God not listening to their ideas. Arrogance. Next one, and the last intellectual issue that we run to is the wrong focus. Numbers chapter 13. So, we have spies on the border of the promised land being sent away in order to inspect the land. And they see amazing land. They see a beautiful place. And they come back, and this is what they say. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. It was the Caleb. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. Spies go over there. They see the giants. They see the descendants of Nephilim. And they freak out because these guys are towering them. They say we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. So, all they see is these giant adversaries. They don't look back to remember what happened to them through all of this time spent in the desert, crossing the Red Sea, being fed, all of these things that God did for them. They forgot about all of it. Their focus, instead of being on what God did for them, turned onto what they have to deal with. The problem was not the miss of the fact that they have to deal with this. The problem is their exclusion of God in dealing with this problem. They thought that they themselves were supposed to deal with it for whatever reason. That's why Joshua and Caleb stood up and said, no, guys, hey, we can take them. But their focus drove them away from God because all they saw was the problem. All we see is my bills. All I see is that I'm 2 months late with my mortgage. All I see is this cancer that is not going away. All I see is my dear family member going deeper into addiction, and it's going to end up bad. And what do? I can't deal with this. We can't deal with this. I don't know what to do. We can't deal with this. This is going to be bad. Instead of looking back and remembering how God dealt with it before, we focus on the problem. And that takes us away from God. And that's not the only thing. There is even worse situation that could happen that is written in Mark chapter 9. So, Jesus is with a couple of his disciples on the Mount of Transfiguration. He is up there with them. He shows them his nature, his divine nature. They're coming back all super happy, going to the village, and they see an argument in the village. What's going on? Now, put yourself in shoes of the father who brought his possessed boy to get healed. He heard so many stories about Jesus and his disciples casting out demons, healing, helping people, and he is full of hope. He brings his son there, please. And they're like, don't worry, Pops, we're going to take care of it. And they couldn't take care of it. And this man is, what are you doing to me? Why did I even believe this nonsense? There is no such thing as miracles. He sees his boy being tormented by this demon. And Jesus comes. And what's even more odd in this story, Jesus continues the torment. So Jesus says, what's going on? And this father tells him, well, I brought my boy. He is possessed by the demon, and your disciples couldn't do anything about that. And Jesus is like, okay. So tell me, how does this work? What happens? And just imagine this man. He just wants his son healed, and Jesus is getting into a discussion. And he's like, well, I don't know. He gets thrown into the water, into the fire, and it's just, if you can do anything, please do anything. What do you hear in there? Doubt. If you can do anything, please help. Why doubt? Because he just witnessed a failed attempt of getting help. How many times that happens to us? I need help. I go to the pastor. He tries helping me and he didn't do anything. I go to other people who are believers and they didn't do anything. They couldn't do anything about it. And I'm on the point where I'm saying, like, I don't know, I guess God can't do anything about that. Have you ever been there? And then Jesus continues his torment. Jesus tells him, wait, say it again. Did you say, if I can do anything? Well, let me tell you something. So he gives him a Bible study. So, anything is possible to whoever believes. So if you believe, it's going to happen. And this poor, wretched man cries out. The father instantly cried out, I do believe. But what? Help me overcome my unbelief. Wrong focus. All he saw was a failed attempt of God's power engaged. And right now, all he knows is that God cannot do. And that wrong focus took him to unbelief. The last one that we're going to talk about today is the relational issue that takes us away from God. And that is wrong alliance. And we can see that in 1 Samuel chapter 28. So this is the story of the first Jewish king, Saul. Saul was not a great guy. He would do things the way he wanted to do things. The only connection he had with God was through the prophet Samuel. He gets stuck, he goes to Samuel. Samuel pleads to God, and he goes on doing his own stuff again. Samuel dies, and at that point, Saul's connection with God is cut off. Did Saul go to the tabernacle? Did he go to the priests? Did he go to another prophet that was in the country at that time? No. He makes the wrong alliance. Saul then said to his advisors, find a woman who is a medium so I can go and ask her what to do. Just a couple of years back, he slaughtered all of them. Now suddenly he's going to them for help. This God thing is not working. I'm going to try with Islam. Maybe Buddhism will do. You have a lot of people who turn away from God and make alliances that don't take them anywhere else for various reasons. But the matter of fact is, the moment I start flirting around with other options, I'm cutting myself off away from God. These things that we just talked about, it's not an exhaustive list. This is like the most prominent things that I found in the Bible to present it here. But these situations, my dear friends, are the ones you need to look for in your personal life. Let's look at this. Let's look at all of these situations at once. So, emotional reasons, we said fear and grief. Elijah had a problem with fear. Peter had a problem with fear. Father of a possessed boy. Disciples, Saul, spies. Then you have grief. John the Baptist and Mary and Martha show grief. Then next ones, the intellectual ones. Lack of information. Elijah had bad information. Jonah had bad information. Failed expectations. You have again, Johann. Okay, it's Jonah. Disciples, father of the poor boy, Mary and Martha, Judah. They had their expectations failed by God. Eve was the gullible one. That's the only single one I think I ran into. Arrogance. You had Jonah, who was very arrogant. You had Saul. You had Judah. Wrong focus. Peter, father of this possessed boy. Spies. Mary and Martha. Judah again. Do you see this? So it's never going to be one thing to drive us away from God. In most instances, it's going to be a combination of different emotional, intellectual, and relational issues that will drive us away from God. The key is seeing them, recognizing them, and dealing with them in a proper manner. The relational one, I think we have, next slide. The wrong alliance. So you'll see Eve, you will see Saul, and you will see Judah with that issue. Now, look at the ratings. This is how I managed to rate them based on biblical examples that we have here. Top One is shared between fear, failed expectations, and wrong focus. These are the top 3 reasons we see from these examples that we just read that drives people away from God. The one that follows pretty closely was arrogance and wrong alliance. And then we have grief and lack of information and gullibility at the end. This is the thing that we need to remember. These situations happen every single day in our lives, some of them. And they have a potential to take us away from God, to kill our faith, to make us stop believing. And as I said, this is not close to be exhaustive list. But these are the things that we can see in our lives. And I'm telling you, if you recognize these things in your personal experience in time, and you address them in time, there is a chance that you're not going to sink as deep. And there is a potential that you will bounce faster and higher. This coming 3 sermons that Pastor Gordon is going to have through August and September are going to deal with the answers. If this drives us away from God, what do we do and how do we handle these situations so we would sink less and bounce up more? So this downhill road is not going to bother us. Let's read our last verse for today. Matthew 26:41. Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give into temptation. Why does Jesus say that? For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. I'm not going to give any answers today. I just raised a lot of questions, because we don't have that much time. But I will invite you on Wednesday evening, 7 p.m., to join me for a Bible study, where we are going to dig deeper into these things and try to answer some of these questions. In the meantime, be aware that our bodies are weak. Don't think that you can avoid failure. We can't. We are not wired like that. The only one who avoided the failure was Jesus himself. But what we can definitely avoid is for that failure to break us, that failure to take us away from God. So today, as we wrap this up, and as I close with we'll sing one more song, and I want you to be honest to yourself. And I want you to go through these reasons that take you away from God. And try to make sure that if they are there, you are doing what? Pray for them. That's what Jesus told us. Pray. Because the body is so weak. Let's stand on our feet. Let's sing our closing song. And I'll close with a prayer. And then we'll go on our way, trying to find God better.
Who am I at the highest with the world